Welcome aboard the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon podcast, where we're dedicated to helping first-time and experienced boaters find the right boat at the best price and ensure all boaters have years and years of happy boating fun because life truly is better on a boat. Today's podcast is sponsored by the best boat captain on the water training. It takes the stress, frustration, and swearing out of those dockings and other tough situations so you can have total control of your boat or pontoon. Visit bestboatcaptainonthewater.com for a short video and all the details. Now, let's hop aboard and have some fun. Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon podcast. I'm your host, Captain Matt, and today we've got a special guest. We've got Brock from Charleston. Now, Brock has been on several of my my YouTube and Facebook lives that I do Sunday nights, 8:30 Eastern time. And it's a free-for-all Q&A. People throw out their questions, and I answer them to the best of my abilities. He's been on several of them over the past couple of months. And not only has he asked some great questions going through his experience of recently buying a center console, but he has also provided value in the conversation. And Brock, I appreciate you taking the time to join us and continue those conversations in a audio format here.
Yeah, man, happy to be here.
So let's kind of set the stage. Tell everybody about your boating background and your boating experience and where you came from, what you've recently gone through, and then we'll have several different splinters of conversation from that, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in Maryland. My dad was a big bass fishing tournament guy, so I've been in a bass boat ever since I've been about 8 or 9 months old. I grew up, fishing with my dad pretty much every weekend from March to October up in Maryland because, you got to winterize your boat up there come November, all the snow they get. But, yeah, some of my best memories are out there with my dad in the boat. My mom didn't like the water too much, so she usually didn't come along unless we were just on the river cruising. But, yeah, so I went to school at Coastal Carolina up in Myrtle Beach and eventually ended up down here in Charleston, South Carolina. And I've been bass fishing basically ever since I've been 18 in tournaments. And the first boat I ever bought was a 95 Pro Craft. And recently, about 3 years ago, the old Merc that was on it decided to throw a rod. So my wife was gracious enough to buy me a brand new, well, at the time it was 2018, a brand new 2018 Ranger 521.
Well, that's a good wife right there. That's all right.
Oh yeah. I love that boat, man. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's one of the best riding boats that I've ever been in. I've been in, Stratuses, Bass Cats, Phoenixes. I've been in just about all the makes throughout the tournament ranks riding with people. And man, Rangers, there's a reason why they cost a premium over the other boats. They ride so much better. They hold their value. There's excellent boats, but recently I've got a 6-year-old daughter, and then we just had my son just turned 1, and my sister-in-law, or my mother-in-law, just passed recently, and me and my wife got custody of her little sister. So we went from a family of 3 to a family of 5 over the last 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's been quite the year this year. But the wife wanted to get a boat that everyone could enjoy because, the bass boat, you can only put 3 people in that thing comfortably. So we were looking, and I was originally looking at an offshore, a deep D Sportsman, like a 232 Open or the 242, but the dealer here in Charleston, Hinkle Marine, I went in there and started talking to those guys, and he had the 247 or a 240, a Masters 247, and he brought it in. They didn't have any on the showroom. It was his personal boat for me to take a look at it, and I really fell in love with it. So that's what we ordered, and we put our down deposit on it back in August, right in the middle of August, and the original spray date was supposed to be sometime in December or January. So he said I should take delivery of it between the end of January and February. Well, about the end of September, I got an email from him saying that spray date was pushed to March, the end of March, and I probably wouldn't see the boat until April or May next year.
Oh, wow.
And then week after that, Sportsman sent out an email saying any boat not delivered before January 1st is going to incur a 5% price increase on the boat and all accessories. So I started looking in the used market, and I found this 2019 247 that was about an hour away from me, and it had 146 hours on it. The guy that owned it was a drill sergeant in the Marine Corps, and dude, it's one of the cleanest used boats I've ever seen.
I was gonna say, that sucker is shining up.
Yeah, I mean it's cleaner than my boat, and I take pretty decent care of my Ranger. And this thing is, I mean, if I wouldn't have known it was a 2019, he could have passed it off as a 2021. I mean, it looks brand new. And we took it for a ride. I mean, thing performs great. I pulled the hood off of it. There's, no salt buildup at all on it. He said he only ran it in the salt 1 or 2 times. He mainly fished the river in it, which you could clearly tell. There's not even a sign of corrosion on just about anything. So I ended up buying that from him and then canceling my order down there at Hinkle to get rid of that 22. But I mean, I really like the 20. So the big difference, Sportsman this year, the 2022 model year, they've changed a little bit in the 247. They basically got rid of the splash well on the back of the boat, put it's like a 18-inch setback, I believe, on it with a jack plate. So the back deck is like a good 18 inches, 20 inches bigger. And then the real big difference is the T-top. They changed the whole design of the T-top. It's got the glass windshield, glass side shields. It's got a electronic fold down on it. I mean, it's like a really high, like a 30-footer that has that huge console on it.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's a very, very nice boat, but I didn't want to wait until the middle of next year to get a boat to get out on the water. So
yeah, and pay several thousand more for the boat you thought you were going to get for another price.
We're talking, it was like a $7,000 increase because when I ordered it, it was like 110. So 5% on your 110, yeah, it's not a couple $100, $1,000.
Yeah, that's an impact. So let's talk about a couple of things. So you mentioned you've got tournament bass fishing experience and have operated, fished, and run several different brands in the bass boat market, which I know zero about, other than the general boating stuff that carries over. I've never been on a bass boat. I've never run a bass boat. I just see them screaming down the lake. So let's start there. What are, in your mind, what are the important things to look at in a bass boat?
So the big thing the biggest thing is the motor. I mean, if you're a Mercury guy, Yamaha guy, you got your preferred brands, but the motors, especially if you're buying a used one, bass boats, usually if you look at an hour meter on a bass boat, it's going to have probably a fourth of the time idle speed when you're side scanning with your rear sonar, and then the rest of that time is living over 4,000, 4,500 RPM because you're screaming to a spot, you shut it off.
Yeah.
So, the motor's the big thing, and then the next thing would be electronics. Bass fishing, it's really, you rely on your electronics. There's a reason those tournament bass guys got those gigantic 16-inch screens. They got 2 at the console and 2 or 3 up front on the trolling motor. That's how you make your living. You usually run one dedicated map with contour lines, and then the other one's either on side scan, down scan as you're running down, trying to find structure. And then, you just drop your waypoints. And if you got an Ultrex and you got your Hummingbirds, you can run nav and routes. You can tell the trolling motor do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Now, as just a regular non-tournament fisherman, do you need the most up-to-date electronics? Are the stuff that's 3-5 years old, are they great, but just not the latest and greatest? Are they really making some major advancements in the scan technology? I assume is where most of the advancements are.
Yeah, I would say anything after like 2014, 2015, that's when the real high def side scan, down scan stuff really has come out. So if it's, 2014, 2015, it's a marginal difference. Now, when you're talking like Hummingbird, Garmin, and Lowrance, so Hummingbird and Garmin both use mega. So it's a megahertz signal, not a kilohertz signal. So those two, I've never owned or operated a boat with a Garmin until I bought the center console. And honestly, it's a very marginal difference. It all depends on what size screen you have too. Because if you're running a little 7-inch screen, you're not going to have the pixel density that you got in like a 12-inch or a 16-inch graph.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
I'm a big Hummingbird fan. That's what's on my Ranger. I've got 2 Solex 12s at the console, and then I've got a Solex 12 and a Solex 15 up on my trolling motor. And I personally think the side scan on Hummingbirds it beats everybody. My dad has Lowrances on his boat, and Lowrance comes close. The big difference, I like Lowrance for mapping. I think their waypoint management's a little bit better, but I run the birds because I've got a Makota Ultrax on the front of my boat. So it's an iPilot link. So it links with my graphs, and basically I can ride down the lake and I can drop, if I'm on a lake I've never known before or never fished before, I can run down the lake, drop a couple waypoints, and then pop the trolling motor in the water and turn my front graphs on and tell my front graphs to tell my trolling motor to go to those waypoints. And it'll automatically take me to that waypoint and then stop.
Okay.
And then the other big draw with a Minn Kota and a Hummingbird is that it'll run contour lines. So like, let's say I'm fishing rock piles in 20 foot of water and I'm catching a bunch of fish. I can tell that trolling motor to follow that 20-foot contour line all the way down the bank, and you can set the speed and you can anchor it. Like it's really advanced if you know what you're doing with it.
How long did it take you to learn that system? Is it very intuitive? I've been recently on the Garmin YouTube page, or no, yeah, it was Garmin YouTube page, and they just had training video after training video. Is it difficult, or is it just kind of, it takes you a while to get acclimated, and then you can use even the most advanced stuff?
It took me probably a year to get used to those full touchscreen Hummingbirds, because my old boat had the non-touchscreen Helix series. So I was used to using the keypad and the knob to navigate on the screen. That was my biggest learning curve, was I can actually touch the damn screen.
Oh, that's right. I can hit it right there. That's good.
Yeah,
I do that on my girl's laptop all the time. They've got one that's a touchscreen and one that isn't. And I'm touching the screen that's not a touchscreen. I'm like, why isn't it working?
I was on the lake probably at least a dozen times and still using the knob, and I'm like, geez, I'm an idiot. Like, just touch the screen. But yeah, they're pretty. I grew up with that style of electronics. So I was 8-9 years old messing with my dad's electronics when I was a kid. So
okay,
I would say the user, it all depends how good you are with computers. It's basically a phone that's mounted to your dash. It's, you got options and options and options, and then the big learning curve is like the live sonar. So I personally don't have it on my boat. My dad just bought a brand new Nitro. He just bought a Nitro Z21 of 2022, and it has the Lowrance active target forward-facing live sonar. And that is a very, very steep learning curve. It is, I've taken it out 2 or 3 times with him, and I still don't know what the hell I'm looking at on it. Like it's very, that's the whole, the learning curve is knowing what the objects and what the colors are on the screen.
Okay.
So like, if like hard bottoms will show up depending on your color palette. I like the amber color palette because I think it shows a little bit more depth, so you can see shadows and things. So like an amber color palette, your brighter amber is going to be like a hard return. So that's like, a really hard bottom, like a rock bottom or a really hard packed sand. And then as that color kind of dissipates, like if you get a return that's like a darker amber, that's like a muddy or a silty bottom or a grassy bottom. And then finding bait fish on there, you look for the balls, and then you can, with a Hummingbird, you can actually turn on, I forget what the feature's called, but it reduces the noise and it basically lowers the power of the transducer. So it reduces the noise if you're in muddy water, so it doesn't have all that, blurry through the middle of the screen.
Okay.
It's just very, growing up as a kid, we used to fun fish on Fridays because my dad was lucky enough to work 410s when I was growing up. So we had off every Friday. And we would fun fish on Fridays, and then usually Saturdays. If it was between like May and September, there was usually a tournament on Saturday. So we would always go practice at the lake or river, whatever we were fishing that weekend. And that's where he would kind of run the boat and then find points, and then I'd be back there on the grass. Well, back in the day, side scan was black and white, so it was very hard to pick up things, but you could still pick up rock piles and big trees and that type of stuff underwater. And that's how, we won a couple $1,000s throughout the years. We placed second and third, took a couple first place finishes a couple times. It's all finding structure and relating the fish to the structure.
It sounds like it's almost just, you got to get out there on your unit and start testing things out and seeing what you like, what your personal preferences are, knowing how to get to the right things. And then, do you run like the same visual setup on your monitors, or are you switching through them depending on what you're doing?
So like when I'm running, if I go to the lake I go to all the time, I live 5 minutes from Santee Cooper down here. So I live literally 6 minutes from the Thornley boat ramp in Moncks Corner. And that's usually where I go. So if I know where I'm going, I'll usually have my graph on. And then like if I've got waypoints I'm running to, I just turn on the nav. And basically it's like Google Maps. You hit nav and then routes and then go. And you can put it in 3D mode. Like it's really cool. The first time I ever did it, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, but I've kind of gotten used to driving between the channel markers. Because I don't know if you've ever been on Santee down here, but it is basically stump fields forever unless you're in the channel. So if you're in the channel, you can scream 70 mile an hour. But once you get out of those channel markers, man, you got to be real careful because it can be 30 foot of water and there's a standing tree.
Oh wow. No, I haven't run that part of the Santee Cooper.
So when they built the lakes here, they literally cleared most of Moultrie. So the lower lake is relatively clear of standing timber, except for around the edges of the lake with all the cypress trees. But then on Marion, they were starting to cut the trees on Marion, and they opened the floodgates. So out in the middle by the dam, it's 40 feet of water, and there's trees sticking out of the water.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's very, if the water's up, it hides them. So the water there, if they're letting water out and the water's below 40 feet, you can see them. But if the water's up during the spring, you can't see them. I can't tell you how many times. I've been fishing this lake down here for about 6 years now, and I've seen at least 4 or 5 boats over the years run across the middle not knowing and just tear props up, rip lower units off. It's super dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a good reason to ask some questions about the local water that you're boating on if you're not used to it, because you can save yourself a lot of anxiety and a lot of costly repair bills. So, all right, so let's go one more step into the bass boats. You said, all right, so the motor, because of the way they're run, you're either running over 4,500 or you're idling, scanning. Then the electronics are key. Because what'd you say, 2014 is when they made a pretty big step up in advancement?
About 2014, 2015 that's when at least Hummingbird, I'm not sure about the other brands, but that's when Hummingbird really stepped up their side imaging and down imaging.
What's the third thing that you would say, this is stuff that you may not consider, but it is very, very important, or things that just you like based on all the boats you run and fished?
So I would say the boat storage, because all the different brands do the boxes differently. So like when you're going to buy a boat, open up all the hatches and kind of, get all your gear together before you go, if it's your first boat, and figure out how much gear you have, how many rods, how many boxes of tackle, how many bags of soft plastics, all that stuff. Because boat layout is the biggest. It took me probably 3 or 4 months to get used to my Ranger from my old boat, because those old 90s boats, they only had one rod locker, and they had this big, gigantic hatch in the middle where you put, I kept all my tackle in there, my life jacket lived in there, all of my different sunglasses, all that stuff lived in that big, gigantic front hatch. And then when I bought this Ranger, all the new boats now, you got dual rod lockers, you got 2 center hatches. You got a step with storage. You got a cooler in the middle. I mean, it's like overload with storage. There's so much crap you can put in a boat now. It's not even funny. Like I guarantee you, I could probably put more stuff in my bass boat than I could put in that center console that I just bought. And that center console is almost 25 foot.
That's interesting. I really need to dive into that market a little bit, but I'm not a fisherman, and with my two girls, they'll throw a line in, but they're not that interested in it. But I do need to learn a little bit more about that. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right, so now your family dynamic has changed. You've got your kids are getting older. You've added to the family, and you said your wife says, "Hey, let's do a little bit more family boating than just 2 or 3 of us fishing." And you decide the center console is the right fit there at the coast. What did you discover as you were looking at the center consoles that you found interesting, that you were surprised at coming from the bass boat world? What kind of caught your attention there that you think is interesting for people to know about?
So I would say the biggest thing that really caught my eye. So I mean, I've fished when I went to school at Coastal. I had buddies there that had center consoles and duck boats. I mean, I've been around center consoles enough to know how to operate them versus a bass boat. But the big thing is, so when I water tested mine, when I was putting it back on the trailer, I'm so used to bass boat. I mean, sitting on you're an inch off the water. There's pretty much no wind resistance. You have no top. I mean, your console sticks up maybe a foot. So I'm in this 24-foot center console with this big old hard top on the thing, and the wind's probably blowing about 20 miles an hour when we did the water test on the river. And I'm going to put it on the trailer, and I had to back up like 3 times to get that thing on the trailer because it's just so different the way that boat handles. Because you got that huge T-top that just catches the wind like a kite, and it just, I mean, it pushes the boat all over the place. And then the big thing that I noticed was that I thought that those, like that Sportsman, they advertise like, I think it's like 58 miles an hour or so with the 300 on the back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that thing's 300 horsepower. It should do at least, 60. But when we water tested it, we didn't even have, the freshwater tank was empty. We didn't even have a cooler on the boat. And all the boxes were empty except for 2 life jackets that were in there. And it was just me and the guy that owned the boat it had a full tank of gas. It had 72 gallons of gas. And I mean, we hit like 60 miles an hour. So I was like, okay, so it does 60, but the minute you put, an anchor and a cooler and to fill up it's got a 15-gallon freshwater tank in the front of it for wash down.
Yeah. Did I lose you there, Brock?
Oh no, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So the top end speeds are different. I mean, because you're adding. I mean, shoot, I bet that. How big is your Ranger? How long?
It's 21 foot.
Okay, so if you've got a 21-foot center console, I bet it's 2.5 to 3 times heavier.
Oh yeah, my Ranger weighs with a full. It's got a 50-gallon gas tank with a full tank of gas and all of my tournament tackle in it. On the trailer, it weighs just like right at 3,100 pounds. Okay. I think the boat itself, they advertise the dry weight on my Ranger is like 1,900. So the boat probably weighs, 2,500 pounds or so. Okay. Yeah. So you've got a significant difference in weight. What did you look for? You're using this mainly for a family pleasure boat. Do you see yourself fishing this center console, your Sportsman, a bunch, or tubing, or what do you see yourself doing with your family and your kids? So we'll probably end up mostly towing a tube, and I actually just got by a big old floating dock in. They had them on sale for Cyber Monday. We bought one of the 8-foot by 20-foot floating mats. Oh yeah, like the aqua lily pad kind of thing. Yeah, it's a lily. Yeah, it was at Sam's Club. They had them $100 off for Cyber Monday. So that's great. Like, well, why not? Those things are fun, man. Our kids love them. But that's probably the biggest thing we'll do with it is tubing and then probably sitting at the sandbar with our friends, because I've got a bunch of friends here in Charleston that have had center consoles since they've been kids, and they know all the sandbars where all the tourists don't go in the summertime. So I imagine we probably will fish. I mean, I love inshore fishing. I mean, ever since I lived at Coastal, we fish for reds and flounder and king mackerel fish off the pier. So I imagine me and my daughter will probably do some fishing. And when my son gets a little more interested, we'll probably get him out there too. But I got lucky. My daughter, I mean, we have the neighborhood I live in, we have about 15, 20 ponds around here, and we just toss rods with the golf cart. And when she was little, 2-3 years old, we used to just go around and fish all the ponds around here. And then on the boat, she would fish a little bit on the boat when she was a toddler, but she really just liked riding. Like, I'd set her in my lap and let her hold onto the wheel while we were just driving down the channel markers. And then when she turned about 4, that's when she really got interested in fishing. And I mean, we'll go out on Moultrie here. We'll leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we won't come back until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She loves bass fishing. So I'm sure she'll love inshore fishing too. So.
Oh, that's awesome. You had made the comment in my last video that dropped, I think yesterday maybe, about boating with kids and babies and toddlers. There's nothing to me like the time when your kids are having fun and you're on the water and the giggles that you hear, and just you just sit back and they catch a fish and you just take it in and you just feel great. I mean, there's nothing like that, doing things like that with your kids. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of when I was growing up. 'Cause I mean, that's what me and my dad. That's basically what we did every weekend until I had started playing baseball competitively, and then the fishing kind of went to the side during the summer when I was playing baseball. But spring and fall, man, I grew up on a bass boat pretty much.
Yeah, you'll always have those memories with your dads, and your daughter and your girl or your daughter and your boy will definitely have those too. So what made you settle in on Sportsman? Obviously, they're made right there in Charleston, along with Scout and several others that are made in the area. But how did you settle on Sportsman? Was it just you knew that's what it was, or did you look at a bunch of different brands?
So I looked at Tidewater's, Scouts. So my dad actually used to work at Scout. My dad worked at Scout for like 3 years he used to drive forklifts back in Maryland. He was a 50K certified forklift driver for the government. He worked up at Letterkenny Army Depot for 25 years, and they moved down here when we had our daughter, and he got a job at Scout loading the boats with the forklift. But the big thing with Sportsman is it's the value that they put in their boats. So like, if you look at a Tidewater or a Sea Pro or a Sea Hunt, all of the T-tops are extra, the hard tops are extra, all the live wells are like tiny in those boats. So I'm like, if I'm going to buy a boat, I'm going to buy one that I can fish in too. I don't want a little, I think it was Sea Hunt. One of them, it was either Sea Pro or Sea Hunt. They had it was a 30-gallon aft live well, and that was the only live well in the boat. I'm like, dude, if I'm inshore fishing, my bass boat has damn near 60 gallons of live well on it, and it's a bass boat. Yeah, I've got the Ranger. It's got I think they're 25-gallon twin 25s or twin 26s in my Ranger. So I'm like, I want something at least 2 live wells, and that the Sportsman. Well, Scout does it too. The big difference for me between Sportsman and Scout is kind of like buying a Mercedes. The price on those boats is just absolutely insane for the same style and size of boat. So a 24-foot Scout optioned the way that the boat that I bought optioned was, so the Sportsman was 110 optioned the way that I bought it. If I optioned a Scout the exact same way, same boat, it would have been about probably in the 170s.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a Scout. I mean, everyone that lives out here in the Low Country is always like, when you see one, it's like, oh, yep, it's a Scout. And usually the people pulling them are pulling them with big, gigantic F350, F450s. I mean, it's just unobtainable for a normal person when you get into the bigger boats. The little boats aren't bad. Anything under 20 foot, they're pretty competitive. But once you get that 25 and bigger, man, I mean, my dad, he used the 30, it's like a 33-foot Dorado, I think is what it is. That thing's like $400,000.
Yeah, that I actually sold Scout when I was selling. I was selling them up here in Charlotte, so inland fresh water. So we were selling the smaller ones, but I did get the opportunity to run some of the bigger ones down in Charleston. They're great boats, but I also have been to the Sportsman factory, and I was really impressed with the way they build them and just some of the little things that they do in the Sportsman style. I think they do a great job. I didn't realize there was that big of a price gap though between comparable setups.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's crazy. So the Sportsman's, like, I don't know if you ever looked at the Master Series, but like the Master Series, it gets you the whole inside of the console is finished. So it's not just raw fiberglass that's painted like Scout, Tidewater, Sea Pro, Sea Hunt. None of them finish the insides until you get into like the bigger, like the 28, 29, 30 footers. The little inshore ones are just, raw fiberglass. And then the underside of all the lids on all the Sportsmen are also finished gel coated fiberglass. Like it's not, just raw fiber that's painted. That's what impressed me at the price point. And they use I can't remember what they're called. They're the hinges, the static hinges that don't swing. They stay where you put them.
Yeah.
Like when you open the console door, it doesn't bang close when you're on a wave.
Yep, for sure. So was there anything else that you were looking at that was real important? Obviously getting good value. You didn't go with the cheapest manufacturer out there. There are definitely cheaper ones, but you didn't also go with the Scout that had just too much of the fancy stuff, we'll call it. You kind of ended up in that middle tier. Anything else that was important to you? A little bit of fishability, family friendly, doing some water sports. What else did you look at and find that led you to that decision?
So the big thing that we were looking at was originally we wanted that deep V for more of, it's got a higher gunnel. So for little kids, it's a little safer. They're not like on a real shallow boat where they just fall over the gunnel if you're out in the ocean. But I think the biggest thing was we wanted a boat that it wasn't, because we already have a crazy expensive bass boat. So I wanted something that wasn't, crazy expensive, because the property tax on stuff down here in South Carolina sucks. Like, I mean, I literally just went to the tax office today because I just got the title from the guy that sold me the Sportsman, and it was $1,243 for the boat and $407 for the motor.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. Like that was the other big thing. I didn't want anything that was crazy expensive, because then the taxes on it are going to be just outrageous every year down here.
Yeah, they come every year too. This is in South Carolina. We actually have a property tax that's due yearly, not a sales tax. He's not talking about. This is in addition to the sales tax that he paid as well. So, and so I'll have to say that one of the things that I'm so excited to have Brock on is during one of our lives, we were talking about live wells, as you mentioned that, and I made a comment about the Yamaha center console that had a triangular live well. And I was like, I've never seen that. You want the bait to be able to swim in a circle and you want a round one. And he said, no, that's actually, triangle will do that same thing. And so I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and correcting me, because it needs to happen every now and again for sure. What else did you look for in the boat, or as you are shopping for boats, what do you look for that you think a new boat buyer should kind of consider as you're going through that process?
So like for that center console, I was looking for something, dual purpose. It has to tow a tube. It has to fit at least, 7, 8, 9, 10 people in it. And it has to be able to, relatively fish out of it with, not that many obstructions. So I didn't want something with a sea tow or a ski tow bar sticking up on the back deck, because it's already battered up. It's got 10-foot power poles on the back of it that stick up off the motor. So it's finding that you really have to sit down and figure out what you're going to use it for, so that you can kind of look for features like, do I want shallow water anchors? Do I want to put a trolling motor on it? Do I want a ski tow bar? What am I going to do with this? And if you're only going to tow a tube, 2 or 3 times, it's probably not worth it to put that ski tow bar on the back of it, because you can just hook it to the D-rings with one of those Y harnesses and it's fine. Then you don't have that big old stainless steel tow bar back there in your way every time you try to cast off the back deck. But I think that's the biggest thing that I looked at was it has to be able to fish and tow a tube and have fun with the family at the same time. Unlike, a bass boat where it's purpose built, go fast, fish out of it. I mean, you can tow a tube in a bass boat. I've done it, but it's not designed for that.
Yeah. I like what you said about think about how you're going to use it first. I think if you slow down in the process and you have those conversations with your wife, the kids, take their opinion as much as you need to, but you're writing the check. But when you have those conversations up front, it really does make the searching for the boat kind of steer itself in the right direction, just because you know what's important. You know how you're going to be using it. You know what options that you should consider, and the ones that, like you said, the ski tow bar, great for some people, total pain in the ass for other people, and a waste of money.
Yeah. Now, if they made one, so I know a couple of manufacturers now are making some that are pinned in that are removable. Mm-hmm. Which if Sportsman did that, I probably would have got that on the one I ordered. But because I asked the dealer, I was like, hey, is this thing can I unpin it and take it out of there if I buy it? And they're like, no, it's bolted straight in. But I think it's, I can't remember who it is. It's either Tidewater or Scout. They offer one that is pinned in. So I guess they put, it's probably a lot like a pedestal seat, I imagine is probably what it is. It probably has a well, and then that thing, mm-hmm. the tow bar goes down in there and it has a safety pin that pins it in.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't seen that myself, but I'll be on the lookout. Hopefully I'll make it down to the Charleston Boat Show this year and check out all the boats there, spend a day or two. Because it's always interesting to see what the new innovative designs that people come up with that make a lot of sense like that. A removable ski tow bar, if it's strong, is a great option for sure.
Yeah, hopefully we're actually doing the next, is it this weekend? I think it's next weekend. Next weekend is the Christmas parade down in the harbor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we got to decorate the old center console. That'll be the maiden voyage in Charleston, putting in down at Leeds and checking it out.
That's awesome. Anything running a boat in that environment? I mean, in Charleston, you've got the rivers that are going to lead into the harbor there. You've got big container ships coming in. I mean, right there.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? What do you think about when you're operating that environment, and what advice do you have for people that may be operating in a more challenging environment than just going on a freshwater lake?
So the first thing down, at least here in Charleston, is you have to know the rules of the road, because I mean, you've got container ships, you've got cruise ships, you've got all these there's a million sailboats that are moored out there off of the harbor. And I mean, especially at night, like if it's early morning or night and if you've never been there before, definitely I would pay somebody, find a captain around here and have them take you out, because it is, all the sandbars shift down here. So anything that's marked on a map probably isn't there, because they move about every 90 days or so. Especially
really? We've been having that.
Yeah, these king tides, man, they've been killing it down here. So I usually fish with my neighbor 2 doors down from me, has a 215 Sea Hunt, little bay boat, and we've fished pretty much exclusively out of the Folly River down there on Folly Beach. And there's a bank as you're going out on the left. There's this huge sandbar there at low tide. And recently with that king tide we had like a month ago, it moved the sandbar all the way up next to the crab traps, like next to the channel markers. So people used to cut across there like this 50, 60 yard wide path that went through, but now it's literally like 2-3 inches of water at low tide. I mean, it is, you really have to pay attention. And it's like my buddy, I've got a guy that he was from Florida that I went to college with, and he's like, brown run aground, blue sea, go ahead. And it's always, you know, you got to pay attention, especially down in the rivers here, because the markers move, like all the sandbars will shift. Like you can't go out there and, you know, hammer down, because, you know, most of the time, if you stay in the channel markers, you're usually good, which in the harbor, you're fine in the channel markers. But as soon as you start getting into those, like the Cooper River, the Ashley River, you really have to slow down and pay attention, especially now, the winter time. Now is when all the damn barges are out there. They got those barge lines. Actually, I don't know if you're part of the Charleston Boat Life page. About 3 weeks ago, somebody hit one of those submerged barge tubes, those big, gigantic steel lines that run through the harbor at like 50 mile an hour in their center console, and ripped the hole about probably 10 foot deep in their center console. And he broke his collarbone and something else. He flew out of the boat.
Just speeds that weren't appropriate for the environment and not paying attention, probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had a point. Like, they're supposed to have lights on those things, and they didn't have any lights on them. But at the same time, like, you know, the barges are in their area. Don't be doing 50 mile an hour when the sun goes down. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Kind of common sense.
Yeah, it's you know, I always say that us lake boaters, and I'm mainly a lake boater, we've got it in rivers. We've got it real easy compared to you all at the coast, and especially there in Charleston when you add the commercial traffic and all the activity in Charleston Harbor there. And yet it's beautiful. I mean, it's awesome to have a porpoise swimming off your bow, and the wildlife and all that, you know, and running down the water, and you get to see the Carnival cruise ship right off your bow going out for
Yep.
and the Coast Guard with their artillery on board protecting everything. It's a cool environment, but a lot more challenging.
Oh, it was pretty wild. What was it? Last week we had those, I don't even know what they call them. It's when the clouds dip down like below the skyline here.
Okay.
And a bunch of people were coming back in. It was in the evening, so you got the sunset going behind the Ravenel Bridge down there downtown, and all the clouds were under the bridge. So all you could see were the pillars on top of the bridge. Like, they were really cool sunset pictures.
Oh,
I mean,
nice.
and they got, what ruins it is, you know, now they're dredging the harbor, so you got all those cranes in the background. So you got all these damn cranes that ruin the sight line, but it's still the harbor, man. There's really nothing like it. I've been around. I've been on a Savannah, Beaufort. I've been up Myrtle Beach. I mean, we used to run out of Pawleys Island and Myrtle's Inlet up there, and there's just nothing like the Charleston Harbor, man. The views down there are just crazy. And there's a bunch of day docks at all the restaurants that are on the water. So, I mean, if you're in town for the day, you can just pull up to one of those day docks, go eat a California Dreaming, walk about a quarter of a mile, and you're in downtown. Like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's the dealership that I sold for has a store down there. It's the Marine Max now, but we would go down and we would take a boat to, you know, like a 50-foot Sea Ray or something like that over to Shim Creek to go for our sales seminar dinner. And I always loved going down there. We took some clients down on a run from Charleston and ran down to Hilton Head. And I've got an awesome picture of about 10 boats lined up coming out of the harbor with the bridge in the background. It was a blast. It was a great time all the way around every time we were down there.
Yeah, we've done, we actually borrowed my neighbor's boat last year, me and my wife, when COVID was bad in the spring. And she used to work in the resort. She was a resort tourism major at Coastal Carolina, and she used to work at the Marina Inn right there on 17 when you're going in North Myrtle Beach.
Okay, yeah.
So they do overnight stays on their day dock. You just have to call them a couple of weeks in advance and make sure they've got space. So we borrowed my neighbor's little 215 Sea Hunt, and we went in the intercoastal from down here. It was right at like 5 hours, you know, doing 25, 30 mile an hour the whole way. And then you got to slow down for all the bridges. But it's a fun little ride, because when you get out of the intercoastal, you have to make a really hard left into the harbor at Georgetown to stay in it. And if you don't follow those intercoastal channel markers and get lost in the other channel markers, you will find yourself out at the lighthouse out in the middle of the ocean.
Pop right out into the middle of the Atlantic. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't ask me how I know.
I've heard stories of other people doing that. It certainly wasn't me.
Yeah. We did the same
boat.
I was following the markers on he has a Garmin on his boat too, and I thought they went to the right. So I went right, and as soon as I seen that lighthouse, I was like, we are not in the right place. Like, that is the middle of the ocean. Like, yeah, turn around.
Water ahead. That's funny. Well, hey, Brock, this has been a really fun conversation. Any last thoughts, any other suggestions, comments that you want to share with everybody? That and again, I appreciate you sharing your boating experience and your knowledge with everybody in the community. It makes the community so much more enjoyable and valuable when other people share their experience that's based on real life, not just that's wrong, nobody should have that boat. It's like, hey, here's my experience, and this is what made sense for us, and hopefully that's valuable. So I appreciate that. But anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, if you're looking at getting in a boat, I would say definitely find a friend that has one before you go buy one to make sure it's for you. Because, I mean, I've got a couple friends that they're just, boats aren't their thing. Like, I've taken them out, 2 or 3 times on my bass boat, and they're like, don't like this. So before you go, spend a couple thousand, tens of thousands of dollars on the boat, I would definitely either rent one, or if you know people that have boats, ask them if you can go out with them, throw in some gas money or something.
Yeah, that's great. I always recommend that, or like Boat Setter or Get My Boat, which are rental, peer-to-peer rentals, and you can get even a captain to, hey, we're in Charleston, I'm nervous to go out by myself. Fine, go out with a boat that has a captain, and they can take you out. You can get the experience. They'll probably teach you how to drive a little bit if you want to, and you can get a real safe, real life experience, and it can put you in the right direction. Or, hey, this isn't for us. Let's put our money somewhere else and not have to go through the aggravation of making a bad decision. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, in the market right now, you could probably buy a boat. I could have sold my boat a couple of days ago to a guy for $15,000 from over what I paid for it. It's just absolutely insane right now.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. Is when you were going through the ordering process here during COVID, you bought other boats before, so you have something to compare it to. What did you find that was different, and how did you deal with going to a dealership and the boat that you wanted probably wasn't there? Is that what you experienced?
Yeah. So when I bought my Ranger, it was pre-COVID, and I got to take it out on the lake and drive it and play with the live wells, and we even fished out of it for like an hour with the dealer here that I bought it from. With the center console, there was literally the only boat that they had that was new, that wasn't in for service, was a 252 Blackjack that was on their the showroom floor. Like, they didn't even have a Sportsman for me to look at. That was the big difference. And then if I would have actually went through with that sale, they don't do sea trials now. So it's just like, you show up, you hitch it up to your truck, here's the keys, have a good day.
Oh,
wow.
I mean, and Hinkle's, yeah, I mean, they've been around forever. They're a good-sized dealership down there too.
Yeah, so that's what the guy I was talking to, he's like, we usually take this thing out. We would put it in the Ashley River right here, and we'd run it down. He's like, I'm selling, because when I went down to cancel it, when I bought my used boat that I bought, I went down there, and as soon as he see me, he's part of the Sportsman page, and when I posted a picture on there, he's like, I figured I'd be seeing you here to cancel this boat, but he said he was selling production slots right now. Like, if I went in there when I canceled my boat back in November and wanted to order a boat, they're selling production slots for August and September next year, which is the 23 model year, but they're selling 22 production spots.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's, normally you get to sea trial it, and then, if it's not for you, you can back out of it because you haven't signed anything for it. You probably lose your deposit, what you put down on it. But I mean, in a normal situation, you could take it out, and if it's not what you wanted, you could always, no, I don't want this. Let me get something else. But in this situation, it's like, take it or leave it. I mean, if you don't buy it, somebody else will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's an attitude that, I can understand it right now. But the customer service has definitely gone downhill in that respect of, let's make sure it's the right boat. Let's make sure that it's exactly what you want. Let's make sure that there's no major issues that we didn't catch in the pre-delivery inspection. I'm curious to how it's going to happen when the tide turns and we don't see that, oh, I just bought a 2018 and I can sell it for 15 grand more, 3 months later, because it's got to turn at some point. It's just, I think it's a year or two off still. Well, hey, Brock, again, I appreciate the sharing your insights, sharing your experiences and your knowledge, and I appreciate you being a part of the community, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's pull up the anchor and run this podcast back to the docks. We'll be back again with another helpful and fun episode next time. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, visit boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/guest, and I'll help offer insights into your boat research and shopping experience. Also, we'd appreciate it if you took just 2 minutes to rate and review this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It helps others find us so we can help more boaters.
By the way, if you already own a boat and experience a little stress handling your boat or pontoon in some situations, visit bestboatcaptainonthewater.com for a quick video and all the details.
Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a few first-time boating tips for when you own your new boat. Number 1, know your local boating laws, basic navigation rules, and how to operate your boat safely. It'll make boating even more fun for everyone. 2, be aware of your wake at all times and pay attention to no wake zones because you are responsible for your wake. When maneuvering at slow speeds, you can put out an enormous wake. If going slow, be courteous, save some fuel, and drop down to idle speed, just in forward gear to ensure there is no wake. This could save you an expensive ticket and will keep you from being that guy on your waterway. Number 3, boats do not have headlights. They have docking lights, specifically made for seeing in tight quarters and docking. Do not turn your docking lights on while cruising down the water. It can blind other boaters and is very dangerous and, again, could save you an expensive ticket. Number 4, follow the maintenance schedule for your boat. Change the oil, impeller, gear lube, winterize if you need to winterize in your area. Inspect your trailer tires, bearings, and grease the hubs if you're a trailer boater to ensure you don't experience expensive and unnecessary repairs that will impact your boating time. Number 5, always double check your plug is in, your battery is charged, and the fuel is full before heading out for a day on the water. It could just save your boating day. And if you're a trailer boater, I've got a few extra tips. Number 1, at the boat ramp, prepare your boat, your gear, and your guests in the staging area. Then, when you're ready, back down the ramp, unload the boat, head to the parking lot, and right back down to your boat to be fast and courteous to your fellow boaters and don't tie up that ramp unnecessarily. Next, use transom tie-down straps when trailing your boat. Very bad things can happen if you don't, and they do happen. 3, check everything in the boat is secure before heading down the road. Seat cushions, gear, keys, towels, even tubes and lily pads can get blown out when pulling your boat down the highway or interstate. And most important, have fun. Enjoy your boat and get on the water as much as possible because life truly is better on a boat. Until next time, this is your friend in boating, Captain Matt.